we're going to be getting into quite a bit here as far as how profiles impact the various security settings in your Salesforce instance. And so if we go into the profile section of setup, and once again I'm typing profiles here on the left, and you'll see that the profiles link is under manage users. So we click the profiles link and we see a list of all profiles that are currently in my Salesforce instance. And I have these sorted by profile name, and then you see as well this custom column. You see that these that are checked are custom profiles, and then the ones that are not checked are standard profiles. For the most part, you want to use custom profiles instead of standard ones. And so we have a lot here in our Salesforce instance. And this gives you an example of pretty much every conceivable standard profile that Salesforce provides. And so the best practice is to create custom profiles using these standard profiles as a template. And so we'll go into that more here in a moment. But for now, if you scroll down, you see that we have more than 25 profiles listed. And so to see the remainder, I'm going to click next here. And the one that I'm interested in right now is my own profile, which is System Administrator. And as an administrator on the Salesforce platform, this will usually be the profile that you're assigned. And it is a standard profile. You'll notice that custom is not checked here. To view the System Administrator profile, or any of these profiles for that matter, you just click on the name of the profile. And I'm going to go into the System Administrator profile. And so now I have this welcome to the enhanced profile user interface. And so you can start the tour here and it'll show you some things around this enhanced page layout for profiles. So first, it's denoting that you can do a quick search. So it's hard to recall where things are necessarily located. So you can find settings through this quick find feature here at the top. You can also quickly change a profile's name or description through the Edit Properties button here. You can also see who belongs to a profile by clicking the assigned users, so that if you're on a particular profile such as System Administrator and you're curious who in your organization has the System Administrator profile, you can click on assigned users to see a list. You can also browse the app permissions and settings here, and these are app-related permissions and settings, and they're grouped on individual pages. And then finally, you can browse system permissions and settings here. We're going to close out of this tour of the enhanced profile interface. So now let's go through quickly some of those things that were just highlighted in the tour and demo those. So for this search box here, if you're looking for specific profile settings, you can just do a search here in this box to pull it up rather than navigating to these individual links if you wish. So I'm going to type up account because I want to adjust the object settings for accounts. And so that would take me directly to the object settings for accounts for the System Administrator profile. And these sort of object settings get into what permissions this profile has. And you notice here that as a System Administrator, I have full privileges. Here along the bottom, these are the object permissions to where I can read, create, edit, delete, view all, and modify all. And I'm not going to go real in depth into those things right now, but just to show how you can quickly go in through this search box to find what you're looking for. If you wanted to make changes, you would click edit and that sort of thing. And then as well, I wanted to highlight these breadcrumbs that are here, and it shows that we're currently in the accounts object settings, and if we wanted to go one level up, we could click here to go to object settings. Or if we wanted to go all the way back up to the profile overview for the System Administrator, we would click here. Also want to show these down arrows here as well. You can switch from object to object by clicking the down arrow. If we wanted to see object settings for cases, we would just select it from the down arrow, and now we have our permissions as a System Administrator profile for cases. And then as well, the down arrow here for object settings, we can go into other sections for this profile, such as assigned apps. You notice here we're in object settings right now, but if we wanted to go to assigned apps or assigned connected apps, app permissions, etc., we could hit those from here. But I'm going to return back to the profile overview from where we came. And then as well, the next part of that tour showed how you can edit properties by clicking this button. So I'm going to do just that. If we wanted to add a description to this profile, we could do this here. And clicking save, for example, I now have a description filled in for this profile. Then next, we can see who has been assigned the system administrator profile by clicking assigned users. So you see here that I'm the only system administrator currently assigned the system administrator profile in my organization. Okay, so now we get into the meat of the actual profile, and keeping in mind that I'm on the system administrator profile currently, we have various settings for the profile, such as assigned apps. And so here is where the application drop down on the right and what is visible to me as a system administrator is controlled. And so you notice that I do not have sample console visible to me. If you look here, you don't see sample console as a application available to me. And that's because it's not set as visible here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to edit this to select sample console as also visible, and then I'll show how that will then display in the application dropdown. So I'm going to click edit now. And you see as well, in addition to the sample console not being selected, which I'll now check, that I have a default application highlighted or selected through this radio button. You can have one default application per profile, and so for the system administrator profile, my default application is Sales. And what that means is when I first log into Salesforce, the default application that appears here is the Sales application in the drop down. So I'm going to click save, and then we're going to look for the sample console in the application drop down. So clicking save, and now if I click here, I have the sample console now available to me in the application drop down. I'm going to show that real quick. And this is a Sales Console setting that we will get into more when we get to the Sales Cloud Applications section of the course. Some organizations use the Sales Console. There's also a console concept around service and support, and so you might have a case management console enabled in your organization. So I'm going to go back to setup, and you notice here I've escaped the console. You can go back to the sample console here if you wish, but the only tab available under the sample console application is this one tab for going back to the console. Not real user friendly for what I'm trying to do right now. So I'm going to click on Sales, which is my default application, to get some of the familiar tabs. So the way that we return back to profiles, once again, would be to click on Setup. And I could search for profiles, but I want to show you as well, or highlight, that in the Setup menu, you know, it's easy to become fixated on this left column here and Groww dependent on even searching. But if you were just in the System Administrator profile, you can just click on it from the recent items. And the recent items are very handy to just go back to where you were and not waste a lot of time. So I'm going to click on System Administrator right here so that I don't have to click through profiles and then select System Administrator. It saves a few clicks. So we've covered assigned apps, and so object settings is one that's real important, and so we're going to spend some time here. And this relates to permissions to access objects and fields, and then settings that specify which record types and page layouts and tabs are visible. So for a system administrator, you see that these are all the object settings, and it shows the object permissions, the total number of fields, the tab settings, and the page layouts for this profile. And so we're not going to go into each one of these, but we are going to touch on some of this. So we looked previously at the object settings for accounts and briefly looked at cases. And so let's look at a different object. And so I'm going to scroll down to opportunities, and you see that I've got full permissions here on opportunities, the number of fields, the tab setting is default on, and this is the name of the page layout for the system administrator profile for opportunities. And so if I click on opportunities, we get the object settings for this object, which is the opportunity object. So if I click on this, I can make changes to the various settings for this object, such as if we wanted the tab to be hidden for the system administrator profile, we could check tab hidden, and that would cause this tab to disappear. We have page layout assignments here, and so there's 4 different page layouts available on the opportunity object. There's a marketing related page layout, a sales related page layout, and a support related page layout. This opportunity layout has all 3 of them combined, and it's more of an administrator view, which has been assigned to us. Then the object permissions, we have full permissions to this object, and since we're system administrator, we don't want any of those to be removed, so we're blocked from being able to change those, because as an admin you need to be able to administer this object and be able to read, create, edit, delete, etc. Then for the field level permissions, this is where on an opportunity, these are all the different fields that are on that object, and these columns give you read and or edit ability for these various fields. So if you wanted to go in and make a field read only, such as I did here for current generators, then you would deselect this edit checkbox. And so I'm going to return that back to its original state so that we're able to edit this particular field, which I've just picked at random. So don't worry so much at this point about individual fields. We'll get into fields more later, but this is where at a profile level you grant or deny access for users to be able to either view a field or edit it. And so some of these fields are visible to a user but aren't editable, such as last modified by. This is a field that is system generated, and therefore it's not something that we want even administrators to be able to change, and so it is read only and not selectable to be editable. So I did previously hide the Opportunities tab for this profile, so I'm going to go ahead and click Save and show how now the Opportunities tab has now disappeared from the Sales application. And so I'm going to edit that again and change the tab settings to default on for the System Administrator profile and click Save, and you'll notice that Opportunities have now returned to the tabs. So let's go back to the profile overview, and moving downward, we've got app permissions for the profile that you're working on. And so there's various app permissions that you can grant or deny for a profile, and these different apps you'll recognize potentially as being those that are in the drop down on the top right. You see we have call center and content and knowledge management. And so as a system administrator, we have the ability, for instance, to manage cases and to manage call centers and manage just about everything, as you can see, transfer cases, etc. And then for content and for all of these apps, we have pretty much everything enabled. And so if you wanted to go in and grant someone app permissions at the profile level, you would do that through the app permissions section for the profile. These other app-related permissions as it relates to Apex class access and Visualforce page access, external data source access, name credential access, and customer permissions, we're not going to go into right now because those don't relate to the admin exam, especially these 4 here as far as Apex, Visualforce, external data source, and name credential. That's more developer related, and so we're not going to go there. So moving downward, we get into the system permissions, and the designation here between the app permissions and the system permissions is, you'll notice here that it says that the system permissions have to do with settings that apply across all apps, such as record and user management. And you can click Learn More to learn more, in addition to what we're getting ready to cover here, which would be for system permissions. And these are things that you need to become familiar with that are available here. Some of these items might be addressed on the exam, as far as understanding what can be set at the profile level as far as system permissions and what needs to be set at the individual user level. So you see, as you're scrolling down, there's a lot of options here, such as being able to create topics, create report folders, create dashboard folders. Some of these things we'll go into more with reports and dashboards and folder management. And if you don't have this permission granted, you won't be able to do those things. As an admin, you'll be able to, but you'll have occasions where you want your users to be able to create report folders, for instance, or you may want to block that. And so you can do that at the profile level. And there's simply probably 100 different options here. As an admin, we have most of these checked, as you can tell. And so we're not going to go into each of these in detail. But then as well, you see user settings here, where as a system administrator, you can assign permission sets to a user. You can manage internal users, IP addresses, etc. You can even view all users and reset user passwords and unlock users. These are all things that will be checked for you by default. And it's more when you get into other profiles other than system administrator, where you need to give more granular access or deny certain ability to users, where you'll set or deny these things. So I'm scrolling back up. I'm going to go back to the profile overview and back down to the system settings for this profile. You have desktop client access. That gives permission to access desktop clients such as Connect for Office. Login hours is something to where you may see that on the exam, and that has to do with the hours that someone can actually log in. So if you, by default, users have access 24 hours a day to log in, but if you wanted to set business hours, you can do that to where if your business is closed on weekends and you don't want your users to be able to log into Salesforce, you can have those times be blocked. You can set default begin times and end times by day, that sort of thing, and save. I'm not going to do that right now so that we leave it wide open, but you may have a question on the exam related to how do you or where do you set the login hours, and that would be at the profile level. And then finally, a couple of other nice things to know are session timeout settings. You can adjust these at the profile level. And so if you wanted a system administrator, if you wanted your timeout to be longer than 2 hours, you could go in and set it to a different amount. And I'm going to set that to the 12-hour mark. So that means that I should remain logged in for the next 12 hours, even if I'm away from my Salesforce instance, and that way I'm not automatically logged out. And then for other users, you may want their timeout to be a lot shorter. Like call center agents, you might want their instance to log out after 15 minutes so that someone else doesn't hop on to their machine and do something they shouldn't, that sort of thing. From a security standpoint, you usually want these to be shorter time windows. But for users that sporadically use Salesforce, such as sales managers or sales people in general, you may want that to be 1 or 2 hours because they're not always on Salesforce. They might be on phone calls or sitting in meetings, and if they have to continually log in, that just leads to more users getting locked out and that sort of thing, and more work for you as an administrator. So for as a system admin, I'm going to set that to 12 hours and click Save. So now going back to the profile overview, we have password policies. And so here's where you can set how frequently the passwords expire for a profile, and then as well the password history as far as how many previous passwords are remembered so that they can't reuse a previous password, the minimum length, the password complexity requirement, and then even the password question requirement cannot contain the password itself. Then also the maximum invalid login attempts, and this would be before someone's locked out, and then the lockout effective period, which we have 15 minutes here, and then also settings for obscuring secret answer for password resets, and then requiring a minimum 1-day password lifetime, which would prevent someone from changing their password multiple times in a day, which is deselected by default. So next we'll be going into roles, and then the next lecture after that will be comparing and contrasting profiles versus roles.